They say a woman should never let her profession define her. But when you're a single mother rebuilding your life from the ground up, it feels less like a choice and more like a necessity. My name is Amelia Hernandez. I'm 42 years old, and until last Monday, I was a lead strategic advisor at Peterson & Yates, a rapidly expanding consultancy in San Francisco. I spearheaded the project proposal that secured their $25 million contract with Zenith Technologies, the most lucrative deal in the company's history. Yet, my personnel file won't reflect any of this. That's just how the corporate world operates. My superior chuckled, pushing the termination papers across his mahogany desk. Don't take it personally. He termed it a restructuring. I viewed it as an act of treachery. The moment felt unreal. His office reeked of stale coffee and an overly assertive cologne, the hum of the air conditioning too prominent on that March morning. I stared at the documents, a buzzing sensation filling my ears. After 6 years of crafting the firm's most intricate strategies, sacrificing late nights and countless family events with my daughter Olivia, I was dismissed like a replaceable temp, effective immediately. "I'm sorry, Amelia," he mumbled, a dismissive shrug accompanying his words, his expression devoid of genuine remorse. "We require fresh perspectives, new energy. You understand the dynamics." No, I didn't. Not this way. Not after my unwavering dedication. "Just breathe," I silently commanded myself, maintaining a composed demeanor. I wouldn't let him witness the trembling in my hands. "Thank you for the opportunity," I responded calmly, rising to my feet. He appeared surprised by my composure. I suspect he anticipated tears, anger, maybe even pleas. But having rebuilt my life from nothing once, I'd learned to depart with grace, even when it felt as though my lungs were collapsing. I didn't question his omission of my project during the meeting. I didn't need to. 2 weeks prior, I had finalized the Zenith proposal, the most complex, high-stakes pitch we'd ever undertaken. 3 months of relentless effort went into its creation, refining the strategy, analyzing the data, aligning it precisely with their projected growth. It demanded every ounce of my expertise. The day before the presentation, I discovered the final document on his desk. My name was conspicuously absent. "Don't fret, Amelia," he'd remarked, waving it off casually. "It's standard procedure. You'll receive internal recognition." I didn't challenge him then. I should have. Now, I was being escorted from the building by a human resources representative I barely knew, my belongings in a cardboard box, my email access revoked, my security pass deactivated, before I even reached the elevator. In the parking garage, I sat in my car for almost an hour, clutching the steering wheel, my heart pounding in my chest. I wasn't merely angry. I felt completely devastated, not solely because of the termination, although that was certainly painful, but because I'd allowed him to exploit me, because I'd foreseen this outcome and still poured my heart and soul into my work. Driving home through the freezing rain, I contemplated Olivia, the rent, her tuition, the orthodontic bills still outstanding. I thought of the months of working past 1 a.m., waking to find my laptop still open beside me, of the evenings Olivia dined alone, while I completed just one more task. I recalled his words, "You lack a ruthless drive, Amelia. That's hindering your progress." He was wrong. That night, as the city was enveloped in a winter storm, I accessed my cloud storage on my personal computer. I'd meticulously saved every iteration of the Zenith proposal, every revision, every annotation, including the original concept sketch bearing my name and timestamp. It wasn't a calculated move. I simply believe in backing up my work. What I didn't know then, what he didn't comprehend, was that the head of Zenith Technologies, Isabella Chen, was a former client. We'd collaborated 6 years earlier, when she was launching her startup. She'd once confided, "If you ever need a genuine opportunity, contact me. Those who create deserve more than those who simply sell." I never reached out, but perhaps it was time. Her name sat atop my contact list, like an unfulfilled promise. I clicked compose. "The true author of your proposal, Isabella, I hope this message finds you well. You might not recall me, but we worked together during your initial funding stages. I'm writing to inform you that I recently left Peterson & Yates, and there's something you need to know concerning the Zenith proposal." My fingers hovered over the send button. I didn't realize then that this single email would trigger a sequence of events that would dismantle the very company that attempted to erase me, and that by week's end, I'd be seated across from my former boss in an executive suite, not as an employee, but as his client. By the time I pressed send, my hands were trembling. It wasn't fear, it was adrenaline, the kind that surges from finally rising after repeated setbacks. I didn't know if Isabella would even read the email, much less respond. But at least I'd spoken. At least I hadn't vanished silently, as they anticipated. That night, I lay awake staring at the ceiling, the quiet of my apartment broken only by Olivia's soft breathing in the adjacent room. She'd fallen asleep on the couch, waiting for me to emerge from my room. I hadn't yet shared the news with her. I wanted to spare her unnecessary anxiety until I had a clearer understanding of what lay ahead. The following morning, my phone vibrated. Isabella Chen, Amelia. Of course I remember you. I still utilize the growth model you developed for our Series B funding. Thank you for contacting me. Let's discuss. I have some questions and an opportunity I believe you'll find compelling. Isabella, I sat bolt upright, nearly spilling my coffee. Isabella Chen wasn't just the CEO of Zenith Technologies. She was a prominent figure in the tech industry, renowned for her sharp intellect, ethical conduct, and willingness to challenge the status quo. If she wanted to speak, this wasn't a mere formality. I contacted her that afternoon. Her assistant connected me immediately. Amelia, Isabella stated, her voice calm yet firm. I've examined the documents you provided. A pause followed, ample time for me to brace myself, and I'm furious. I felt you should be aware that the proposal wasn't authored by the individual who presented it to you. I explained, striving to maintain a steady voice. That was my work. Naturally, she replied. I recognized it the moment I reviewed the wording. It bore your unmistakable signature. She posed incisive, detailed questions about the research, data modeling, even the structure of the risk mitigation plan. I answered effortlessly, not because I'd rehearsed, but because it was inherently mine. Every element of it. Amelia, she concluded, I'm terminating the contract with Peterson and Yates, effective immediately. My heart leaped. Are you certain? Absolutely. I don't conduct business with deceivers, she declared, adding, and I don't condone theft, but I don't believe in letting exceptional work go to waste either. We still need the strategy implemented. I'm launching a new venture. I want you to join as a partner and CEO. The position is yours if you're interested. I blinked, speechless. You always possessed a talent for construction, Amelia. You just lacked the opportunity to lead. I can provide that, but I need a prompt decision. I want to hit the ground running. I remained silent for a moment. I need to consider it. I finally responded. Although my heart had already made its decision. I understand, she said. But don't delay. You deserve more than a footnote in someone else's narrative. That's just how the corporate world operates. He was right in a way. The corporate world did operate that way, until someone decided it wouldn't anymore. That night, I told Olivia everything. She sat cross-legged on my bed, enveloped in her favorite oversized hoodie. They fired you? She asked, her eyes wide. But you work harder than anyone. I know, I said, gently stroking her hair. But it's all right. Something better might be on the horizon. She looked at me earnestly, with the maturity only a 13-year-old who's had to grow up too quickly can possess. Are you afraid? Yes, I admitted honestly. But I'm also ready. The next morning, I called Isabella. I accept. Excellent, she replied. Your new title is CEO of Chen Hernandez Consulting. I've already initiated the paperwork. 2 hours later, the news broke. Zenith Technologies cancels contract with Peterson and Yates, citing leadership concerns. Inside sources reported the company was completely blindsided. I smiled, imagining my former boss's expression upon seeing the headline. But that was merely the beginning. The following day, his assistant attempted to schedule a call with Zenith to repair the partnership. Isabella forwarded the email to me with a concise note. He wants to speak with the CEO. Your move. And so, the next morning, when the call was finally connected, and his voice filled the line, panicked and desperate, I took a deep breath, straightened my posture, and uttered the words I'd been anticipating. This is Amelia Hernandez. You're speaking with the new CEO. The silence on the other end was palpable. For a moment, all I could hear was his shallow breathing. Amelia, he finally managed. I wasn't expecting you. I figured, I replied, maintaining an even tone. You were attempting to reach the CEO of Chen Hernandez Consulting. That's me now. He offered a weak chuckle, the type employed when desperately trying to regain control of a lost situation. Look, Amelia, this is clearly a misunderstanding. I wasn't aware of any issues between you and Peterson and Yates. Had I known you were still involved, I would have handled things differently. I let that statement hang in the air for a beat. The audacity of it. You weren't aware, I said slowly. You removed my name from the final version of the Zenith proposal. You presented my work as your own. Then you terminated my employment 2 days later. But you weren't aware of an issue? His voice shifted, more defensive now. I was under immense pressure. The board demanded cuts. I had to make difficult decisions. You know how this business operates. And honestly, Amelia, you're a gifted analyst, but you were never leadership material. That stung more than I anticipated. Not because I believed him, but because it was a line I'd heard for years. Too quiet, too meticulous, too precise, too much, but somehow never enough. You made a mistake, he continued. And I don't just mean walking away. You're burning bridges you might need later. Consider your future. Consider your daughter. That's when I felt the shift. He'd attempted to weaponize my child against me. You don't get to involve my daughter in this, I stated, my tone colder now. And I'm not burning bridges. I'm constructing my own. There was a protracted pause, followed by a deep sigh. You know, he said, you used to be different. You used to be grateful. That word, grateful, as if everything I'd earned was a handout. I was never grateful for the treatment I received. I was dedicated, loyal, but that loyalty ceased when you deemed me expendable. I'm not the one who should be concerned about the future. You are. I ended the call. That same day, Isabella and I met in her downtown office. It was stylish, modern, and bathed in natural light. But it wasn't the design that captivated me. It was the energy. Everyone moved with purpose. It felt vibrant. You handled that impeccably, she remarked after I recounted the call. But prepare yourself. Individuals like that don't surrender quietly. She was correct. By Thursday, the stories began circulating, first on LinkedIn, then through internal channels where I still had contacts. He was crafting a new narrative, that I'd voluntarily left the firm due to poor performance, that I'd been disgruntled, unstable, difficult to manage. It was so familiar, so predictable. I spent the rest of the afternoon reviewing my records, emails, project logs, performance reviews. For 6 years, I'd meticulously documented everything, not anticipating the need, but because I was the type of person who always kept receipts. That night, I received a message from Gabriella, a former colleague. Amelia, I don't know if you've seen what's being said, but I want you to know I'm on your side. We all know the truth, and if you ever require a witness, I'm here. She wasn't the only one. Over the next 2 days, I received over a dozen calls and messages from former colleagues, all sharing similar experiences. Credit usurped, promotions denied, voices ignored. Many had been too fearful to speak up. Some remained, silently enduring. You were the first to walk away, Gabriella said. But now that you have, several of us are ready to follow. By the end of the week, I had more than support. I possessed documentation, screenshots, messages, internal memos, pieces of a puzzle that depicted years of manipulation, mismanagement, and unethical conduct. The best part, I didn't need to utilize any of it, because the board of Peterson and Yates was already growing apprehensive. On Monday morning, a notice appeared on their investor page. The Zenith contract had been officially terminated. Revenue projections were revised downward. Stock value plummeted 8% by midday. And then I received an unexpected email. Amelia, this is confidential, but the board is investigating leadership conduct. Several partners have voiced concerns about the handling of key accounts, including Zenith. There's discussion of a leadership transition. You didn't simply walk away. You exposed something we'd all been overlooking. Anonymous. I read it thrice before closing my laptop. My hands were steady now. He'd claimed I'd made a mistake, but it was beginning to appear that my only error had been remaining as long as I did. By the following week, whispers had transformed into headlines. Top consulting firm loses flagship client amid leadership controversy. Peterson and Yates in crisis mode, following executive shakeup. I observed from my home office, as updates poured in, my laptop open, my phone illuminating every few minutes, with new messages. Each one felt like a quiet vindication. Not because I craved revenge, but because the truth was finally surfacing. The same truth they'd attempted to bury me with. At Chen Hernandez, things were progressing rapidly. Isabella and I were assembling a team, intelligent, sharp individuals. Some had departed Peterson and Yates shortly after me. Others came from Isabella's network. But every single one shared the same motivation to construct something honest, ethical, and exceptional. For the first time in years, I wasn't merely executing someone else's strategy. I was designing the blueprint. Still, I couldn't shake the feeling that something else was brewing. My former boss, let's call him Daniel for clarity, wasn't someone who accepted defeat. Not quietly. Not ever. That Friday my lawyer, Clara, contacted me. You won't appreciate this, she stated flatly. Proceed, I replied, steeling myself. Peterson and Yates has filed a cease and desist order against you. alleging you utilized proprietary information from your tenure there to launch your own business and steal their client. I laughed, not because it was humorous, but because it was predictable. You mean the client whose contract I wrote, whose strategy I designed, and who was already a professional contact of mine before I even joined Peterson and Yates? Clara snorted. Precisely. It's an intimidation tactic. They hope you'll panic and settle quietly, or better yet, give up. Let them try, I said. We documented everything. We did, but I want to be proactive. We're filing a countersuit, defamation, wrongful termination, and professional misrepresentation. We'll also submit supporting statements from your former colleagues. Some are already signed. I reclined in my chair, gazing at the city skyline beyond my window. It felt surreal. A month ago, I was simply trying to retain a job. Now I was defending my reputation in legal proceedings and reclaiming control of my narrative. But what surprised me most wasn't the rapid escalation. It was the number of people who rallied to my support. Individuals like Noah, one of the senior analysts I'd mentored. He reached out late that night. Amelia, I've remained silent for too long. I knew what Daniel was doing. We all did. You were the reason our strategies succeeded. He simply took the credit. I've attached a timeline of project credits showing where your name was removed or replaced in internal documents. Use it if you need to. Then came Anya, a former HR representative who'd left 6 months before me. Daniel pushed to alter your performance evaluations the quarter before you were fired. I have the original file. You were rated exceeds expectations before it was changed to meets expectations. They were laying the groundwork to remove you. I pondered that for a considerable time. Even knowing what I knew, it still stung, not because I believed their lies, but because they were so deliberate in crafting them. They hadn't merely used me, they'd erased me. But now, piece by piece, I was reclaiming the space they'd attempted to deny me. Clara acted swiftly. Within days, she filed the response, including documented proof of my original work, email exchanges with Isabella, and statements from 5 former employees, all willing to testify under oath. The cease and desist order was dropped within 48 hours. No apology, no explanation, just silence. It was the clearest admission of guilt I could have hoped for. The following week, Isabella and I presented our official launch deck to potential investors. Our pitch? A consulting firm grounded in integrity, built by women, emphasizing sustainable strategies over short-term gains. The atmosphere was electric. We secured our first 2 contracts that afternoon. As I stepped into the elevator, I felt a surge of emotions: pride, disbelief, and an undercurrent of sorrow for the years I'd spent awaiting permission to lead. I'd always believed the established system would prevail, that the structures in place were too rigid, too entrenched. But sometimes the system falters. It's the individuals performing the work who sustain it. And when those individuals depart, the entire structure trembles. That night, I picked Olivia up from school. She ran to the car, smiling radiantly. "How was your day?" I asked. She fastened her seatbelt, then turned to me. "My teacher asked us who inspires us most. I said you." I looked over, fighting back tears. "Why me?" I asked softly. "Because you didn't let them stop you, and because now you're the boss." I smiled, my eyes welling up. Not just because she saw me, but because for the first time, I saw myself clearly. By the end of the month, our new company was already making waves. Chen Hernandez Consulting had officially secured 2 significant clients, one a direct competitor of Peterson and Yates. The irony wasn't lost on me. The same firm that once claimed I lacked executive presence was now observing from the sidelines, while I led strategy sessions with Fortune 500 decision-makers. But this wasn't about revenge. Not anymore. It was about reclaiming space and redefining what leadership entailed. The woman who transformed her firing into a CEO role. The reporter had done her research. She knew about the Zenith contract, my termination, and even referenced internal memos that had mysteriously been leaked. "I'm not seeking conflict," I told her during our phone interview. "But I'm weary of pretending that what transpired was typical. It wasn't, and I'm not the only one." When the article went live, the response was overwhelming. Messages flooded in, from other women, former employees, even people I didn't know. This gave me the courage to speak up at work. "Your story is mine, different names, same playbook. I've been silent for too long. Thank you." I should have felt proud, empowered, but something inside me constricted instead. Because with each person who reached out, I realized just how pervasive the damage was. It wasn't just me, it never had been, and now everyone was watching, including Peterson and Yates. 2 days after the article's publication, Clara called me. "They've hired a crisis management firm," she said. "They're trying to get ahead of this. I wouldn't be surprised if they issue a public statement soon." "Let them," I replied. But it wasn't just a statement, it was a full-fledged campaign. They published a blog post on their website titled, "Moving Forward, Learning from the Past and Building Stronger." It was filled with vague language about miscommunications, team transitions, and internal improvements. They didn't name me, but it was clear they were attempting to control the damage. Then Daniel resurfaced. A podcast interview. "Of course, I believe we live in an era where people are quick to assign blame," he stated smoothly. "Look, I've made mistakes. We all have. But the truth is, not everyone is suited for the pressures of leadership. Sometimes people misinterpret decisions that are simply part of running a business." It was so perfectly rehearsed, I almost laughed. But what followed surprised even me. That night, I received a message request from someone I hadn't spoken to in over a decade. Victoria Reyes, former senior partner, co-founder of Peterson and Yates. She had retired quietly before I was promoted to lead strategic advisor, but her name still held significant weight in the industry. Her message was brief. "Amelia, I've been following what's happening. I believe you. If you're open to it, I'd like to meet." We met for coffee in a quiet cafe in the Mission District. She looked older than I remembered, but maintained the same quiet authority. "I stepped down before Daniel assumed full control," she said. "I sensed some of the decisions being made, and knew I didn't want to be a part of that direction, but I never anticipated things to unravel so swiftly." "You knew?" I asked. She nodded. "I suspected, but I lacked proof, and I wasn't courageous enough to investigate further." I studied her face. There was no artifice in her eyes, just regret. "You weren't the only one he tried to erase," she continued. "You were simply the first to hold him accountable." She reached into her bag and handed me a flash drive. "These are internal evaluations, meeting transcripts, and board communications from my final 6 months at the firm. I believe they'll bolster your case, should you choose to proceed." I took it, my heart pounding. "Why now?" "Because it's time the truth had more advocates than excuses," she stated simply. "And because you reminded me what genuine leadership resembles. Quietly replace high-risk staff before IPO consideration. I wasn't a risk due to performance. I was a risk because I knew too much, and because I asked too many questions." The next morning, I forwarded the materials to Clara. Her response arrived within 3 minutes. "We need to go public. This isn't just about your story anymore. This is systemic. Are you ready?" I stared at her message for a long time. Ready? Completely prepared? Absolutely. The decision to go public wasn't taken lightly. I spent that entire weekend reviewing everything with Clara, line by line, file by file, ensuring every document, every timeline, every name was accurate. We weren't merely exposing misconduct. We were setting a precedent. By Monday morning, the story had been submitted to the San Francisco Chronicle, accompanied by a comprehensive evidentiary file. We also prepared a formal complaint to be sent to the state's Department of Labor and the SEC, citing patterns of employee misrepresentation and fraudulent investor disclosures during performance review periods. I thought I'd feel terrified when it all went live, but I wasn't. I felt calm, focused, free. The article went viral within hours. Consulting giant accused of systemic retaliation against whistleblowers. Internal documents leaked. From CEO to scapegoat. The collapse of Peterson and Yates's culture. Former strategist Amelia Hernandez sparks industry reckoning. Finally, I had become the story. Not the woman who was fired, but the woman who refused to be erased. My phone didn't stop buzzing for 3 days. Journalists, former employees, women in consulting firms from New York to Los Angeles. Some called it courageous, others called it career suicide. But for me, it was neither. It was necessary. On Wednesday morning, Isabella walked into my office carrying 2 coffees and a wide smile. "You broke the internet," she said, placing a cup in front of me. "I didn't intend to," I replied. "Exactly why it worked." She sat across from me, studying my face. "How are you truly?" I paused, exhausted, but strong. "I knew you'd be the one to change things," she said softly. But I didn't anticipate the ripple effect. She wasn't exaggerating. Within a week, 2 high-profile executives resigned from Peterson and Yates. Anonymous sources confirmed the board had been aware of internal misconduct for years and had actively downplayed concerns. A former HR director came forward on record, confirming systematic efforts to downgrade performance reviews and silence employees who raised concerns. The firm's legal counsel issued a statement promising a top-to-bottom restructuring. Daniel, he was placed on immediate administrative leave pending an internal investigation. His LinkedIn profile vanished overnight. No posts, no spin, just silence. I didn't gloat, not even for a second, because this was never about revenge. It was about recognition. Recognition for the hundreds of employees like me. Quiet builders, invisible architects, the ones who make things work behind the scenes, and are then dismissed without a second thought. It was about rewriting the ending. For ourselves, for each other. Olivia and I sat on our porch, that Friday evening. The air was warm for spring, and the sky was painted with streaks of orange and purple. "Mom," she said, looking up from her phone. "You're on TV again." I chuckled. "I know. Getting tired of seeing my face." "No," she said, leaning against my shoulder. "I think it's cool. You didn't let them treat you like you didn't matter." I kissed the top of her head, feeling the weight of what that meant, not just for me, but for what she now believed was possible in her own life. Later that night, I sat at my desk, reviewing an invitation from a university in Berkeley. They wanted me to speak at their annual Women in Leadership Summit. The title they'd assigned, How to Be the Architect of Your Own Power. I accepted, not because I craved the spotlight, but because someone needed to say it out loud. The way things have always been isn't the way they have to stay. The following month, Peterson and Yates formally settled the case. A confidential financial resolution, a public apology, and the resignation of 3 additional partners. More than money, the settlement required them to implement new employee protections, an independent ethics board, and quarterly transparency reports. It wouldn't fix everything, but it was a start. As part of the agreement, I declined a non-disclosure clause. If they thought they could buy my silence, they hadn't been paying attention. I remained CEO of Chen Hernandez, guiding the firm into its second year with a new client portfolio, a reputation for integrity, and a waiting list of applicants eager to join. But more importantly, I remained visible. Because stories like mine only matter when they're told, when they remind others that their experiences aren't isolated. That silence isn't the price we pay for survival, that we get to decide when our story ends. And for me, this wasn't the end at all. It was the beginning.